The internet has revolutionized the way we communicate, entertain ourselves, and do business. For the first time in history, Americans can talk to our families and shop for products, ranging from books to food to automobiles, simply by logging on. For many Americans, the internet has also become a lifeline, connecting them with emergency financial services that traditional banks are unable or unwilling to provide. On the road to self-determination and fueled by their entrepreneurial spirit, Native American tribes are using online lending businesses as virtual vehicles to create jobs and fund essential social, educational, and medical programs for their members, often in remote areas with stagnant economies and high unemployment. This is a story about two very different groups of people, Native American tribes and underbanked U.S. consumers, united by the internet. It's a modern American success story, a unique partnership, and an unlikely solution.
When I was growing up as a kid, I couldn't wait to get married, have the family, the dogs, the white picket fence, the dream.
Coming out of grad school with 60 grand in student loans was a big shock to me.
Everything going up, gas, electric, bills themselves going up, car payments, interest rates going up. Being able to save 3 months worth of your bills is almost virtually impossible.
38 million Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Over half the population can't access $2,000 in case of an emergency. Most of these people are not considered poor, but are having a cash flow crisis, often because their financial resources are tied up in their homes or other illiquid assets.
There was an emergency that I had. I needed money to pay a bill that was due, and I didn't want to accrue an NSF fee. And not only that, if they put the check back in again and you still don't have the money, that's another $35.
I had to get dental work recently, and it was over $600. So I needed, I wrote a check for the work that I did, but I really didn't have that much in the bank.
So there was a period of time when I was out of work, and right when I got back to work and got back on track and everything was rolling, I had a tragedy in my family. My dad passed away suddenly.
And there's a lot of people like us out here that are struggling and still very responsible. And we have to have some place to go.
This is pretty simple. There are 71 million people in this country that do not have proper access to the banking system, a quarter of the country. I think that's a national problem. I think that's a national disgrace. And I think we ought to be doing everything we can to fix it.
After exhausting other opportunities, such as bank loans and borrowing from friends and family, many consumers find that online installment loans offer a solution that is quick, convenient, and available from the privacy of their own homes.
Did a lot of research on web loans because we research everything.
Went online, it was very private, in the comfort of my own home. Didn't have to go into a bank and talk to a banker.
Because this was something that needed to happen rather quickly. So this, for me, seemed like a short-term solution that I could do and I could be in control of.
It's responsible, it's reasonable, and have easy payment terms, so it saves a lot of stress.
This innovative solution is not coming from big banks or technology giants in Silicon Valley, but rather from American Indian tribes that are located on some of the most isolated lands in the country, where paying bills, finding jobs, even heating your home can be challenging.
We are in one of the most remote places in the United States. And although we do have some larger cities within 100 miles of us, we're still sitting in the middle of nowhere.
45, 47 below with the wind chill. So it's a stress to just worry about whether or not you're gonna be able to heat your home or make enough, earn enough money because there's not a whole lot of jobs here.
This is crazy, especially on the old Indian. And it's hard. It's with this recent influx in the prices of propane, that was crazy. And I feared for my people having to live in cold houses and possibly freezing. What's more important? Is it to be warm or have something to eat? And no one wants to make those type of choices.
The United States is home to 566 federally recognized Native American tribes, representing under 2% of the U.S. population. These tribes, America's original inhabitants, work hard to preserve their traditions and their languages, maintaining a strong sense of community, self-determination, and self-reliance. Life on Indian reservations is challenging. More than 25% of Native Americans live in poverty. On some of the more remote reservations, unemployment can exceed 60%. And in the age of the internet, while 3/4 of Americans have reliable access to broadband, for Native people, that number drops to 1 in 10.
I don't think most of America realizes, has any idea of the situation in Indian country in many of these rural communities. When we're talking about the northern plains, some of the rural New Mexico, rural California, the deep south where tribes are located, the federal government put us on some of the worst pieces of land in the United States. And yet we continue to survive because we're innovative, we work hard, and we find ways to make it work for us.
I'm going for finance, a bachelor's of science in finance, and I'm an account manager at CVS Health. I am a single mother, and me just being by myself with my daughter, taking care of her full-blown, no assistance from anyone, the state, outside resources, no assistance. I'm busy. I'm just busy nonstop. I'm in school full-time. I work a very demanding position where I may go in at 7 and not get off till 10 o'clock at night. My daughter keeps me going. She wants to do ballet and she likes gymnastics. She's in gymnastics too. Paying for daycare is extremely expensive. Daycare is more than my rent most of the time. Are you hungry? Yes. It's hard. You have to really learn to kind of budget your money, and what may be in your savings account, you can only pray it stays there long enough for you to add to it, because something's always going to come up. My grandfather passed. I had just paid all my bills, and I had about $200 left over after I paid everything. So rather than miss out on my grandfather's funeral, I'm definitely going to take out a loan, or if extenuating circumstances present themselves again, I would definitely do it again. It was on track. I didn't have to worry about the payment coming out. It came directly out of my bank account. I didn't have to mail anything in. If there was an issue, they gave a number to call. So it was definitely a great experience in regards to that.
These businesses aren't just helping consumers across the country. They're also helping tribal governments meet the needs of their members. When consumers log on to a tribally owned lending business website, they are essentially stepping on to Indian land.
We provide a forum in which people can electronically come into our reservation via the internet. It's the electronic equivalent of walking into our reservation and taking out a loan at a tribal bank or financial institution.
So how do we help the Indian tribes that are in very remote locations? How do we help them with economic development? Online business is an important way to go, online lending and other forms of online business, because then the Indians can reach the world. The world doesn't have to reach them by going, getting in a car and driving to someplace 1,000 miles away.
However, unlike big banks that enrich corporate executives and their shareholders, the profits tribal businesses receive remain on the reservation, helping thousands of tribal members and the surrounding community.
It is the most significant distinguishing factor of tribes being engaged in commerce and running these enterprises. 100% of the monies the tribes make go back to the tribal government.
We really see the internet as a great equalizer for small tribes and rural communities to be able to bring services and revenue into our communities in order to provide essential government services to our tribal members. And when I say essential, I mean essential. We're talking healthcare, education, water, sewer, roads.
The internet tribal lending opportunities that we have has been a game changer for our tribe. It has provided for 100% of the various programs for our elders. It provides for scholarships, and that's a very important project that we've been working on. We've got kids that are coming out of college now that we've helped. We've got various youth-oriented programs, and it wholly supports our education program.
Everyone's really focused on education because it's a gateway for opportunity. You know, as a springboard to let those people who want to pursue education, their culture, their history, or just better their lives, I think this is just the start of that opportunity.
Tribal businesses also create meaningful career opportunities for tribal members and local residents.
Before I started here 2 years ago, there weren't many opportunities job-wise through the tribe, but with these entities, it opens it up to a whole new perspective. You know, we have a chance to go from being a customer service rep to being a supervisor someday. You know, I never thought that I would be in the position that I'm in now. You know, it's amazing.
I'm grateful that I have a job there. The main thing is just stability for myself and my son that lives with me, just to make sure that we always have our basic needs met.
Among the documents that founded this great nation, the United States government signed hundreds of treaties with Native American tribes. These enduring documents set forth the United States government's trust responsibility to provide for the health, welfare, and well-being of these sovereign tribal nations. As such, tribal governments have relied on federal programs and grants to meet the needs of their members.
When the Constitution was drafted, I think our founders understood that there was a special obligation and a special responsibility that Americans had toward tribes, that they couldn't just be treated as any just ordinary set of people. I mean, after all, they were the original inhabitants of the land. There were all sorts of treaties that had been struck between different tribes and the now new American government. And so there was, as the U.S. Supreme Court has recognized, a special responsibility of trust that has been placed on the federal government to protect tribes and to nurture them.
In recent decades, these federal trust dollars have become increasingly inadequate. In order to survive, tribal councils across Indian country see economic development as the only solution.
I think our entire tribe, every program out here has something to, a bit of thanks to give our tribal council. And there's no telling today, had we not ever entered into an economic development agenda, there's no telling today where this program would be at, or the tribe itself. Because over time, a lot of the federal programs, they cut back, and it's not guaranteed. I have seen our tribal government close down because of appropriations weren't being met. And if it was to happen today, I don't think it would be such a challenge for the tribe.
Many tribes are just beginning on the road to economic sustainability. After decades of fighting for federal recognition, the Mechoopda Indian tribe of Northern California recently won a 15-year legal battle to reclaim 600 acres of tribal homelands lost over 150 years ago. For the first time in generations, the Mechoopda now see the possibility of economic relief.
I'm hopeful that we'll be able to really function as a fully whole tribal government and be able to offer services to our members as we're supposed to do through our tribal constitution. We're in charge of the general welfare of our members, but we just don't have the funds to address their basic needs right now.
Tribal councils have always struggled to bridge the gap between the growing cost of basic social services for their members and the stagnant federal trust dollars they receive. For the Mechoopda, as on many Indian reservations, too often in the balance are the children.
We have a tribal membership of about 500. Most of our population is children. You know, it's a very emotional topic for me, so it's difficult to address and talk about it to you. So, you know, we just are desperate for services for them, and, you know, quality services. that are specialized in substance abuse, that could help us with gang affiliation. We just don't have the resources to address those issues for our members. And having the funds to do that will really enable us to provide those services for the members.
Like the youth, tribal elders often go without much-needed services. Finding the funds for a basic meal program for seniors can be a challenge.
It's very minimal, very minimal. We give a gift card at Christmas that's maybe $50. So that's...
And how your elders do it?
That's probably why we do everything that we do, so we can provide for them, because they've been waiting for this land for a very long time.
You know, to struggle is hard. You know, we've came up from not having anything in this community at all. We didn't have any housing. We didn't have the tribal operations. We didn't have the rec center. We never had any health care. Because of all of these things we've built in our community, we take a sense of pride.
Most of our reservations are oppressed, and it's trying to get the people that don't know any different. You know, they've been able to see across the fence, but they've never been able to jump that fence.
As a result of the digital revolution, for the first time in history, geographic isolation is no longer a barrier to economic self-sufficiency and long-term job creation.
The Silver Cloud Board of Directors meeting shall come to order.
Tribal councils see the internet as a unique opportunity to improve the lives of their members. These sovereign tribal governments create laws that not only protect consumers, but also establish a legal framework to regulate their tribal lending operations, just as they did when tribes entered the gaming industry several decades ago.
Our tribal entities are wholly owned corporations that are an arm of the tribe that abide by the laws of the tribe as well as federal laws. The entities have to be licensed pursuant to the law and be held accountable to federal laws as well.
When folks say that tribes are sovereign, what they mean is they're not just like any other group of 1,000 people or 10,000 people, that they're imbued with a special decision-making power, and they act more like a government than they do like just a disaggregated group of 1,000 people who've come together for one cause or another.
You have been licensed and you're in good standing within your jurisdiction. I get that. As a tribal sovereign government, tribes are able to pass laws and to be governed by them. Within the passage of that law, it creates a regulatory authority. That regulatory authority is vested with the ability to regulate the day-to-day operations of our lending enterprises.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
This is not a new or novel concept. Tribes making laws, governing themselves by them, and regulating themselves pursuant to those laws. They've been doing so for over 25 years in the gaming industry. So it's really demonstrating that while this is a newer form of economic development for tribes, it's really tribes engaged in sovereignty, and it's a very positive thing for tribal communities and for Indian country as a whole.
We had some medical bills that came up with my daughter about a year ago. You know, insurance didn't cover, so you save money, but once the savings is gone and stuff happens, you never think you're gonna be that person that's actually taking out a loan. And you know, I always thought I was responsible and money wouldn't be an issue, and I've always budgeted, but you know, you never know what comes up and bites you. I'm in IT. That's how I met my wife. She's in IT, so we bring in about 150 to 160 in a year. That's what we're bringing in right now as a family. I have great kids, you know, 9, 6, and 3. We have a stepson that's 18. We have 2 dogs, 1 big, 1 little, and then we have 2 cats. So we definitely have a full household. It's a good thing we have a 2-story house because we use every inch of this house. Our 3-year-old is my special little angel. She was diagnosed with Down syndrome. With a child with Down syndrome, you're probably looking at an extra 15, 20 grand a year easily on medical expenses that you would have with just a normal child. There's stuff that comes up with a child with special needs that, you know, a normal family can't take care of. It's an expense, you know, out of your pocket. You can come up with 9 grand in a month out of the blue. And what's a parent gonna do? Parents can do whatever it takes to get their child what they need.
So I'm 5 years out of grad school. I am working full-time, living here in Dallas. We were gonna head down to Austin for a music festival. I had a problem with my car, in particular the alternator on my car. Took it to the place I usually take it to check it out. It said the alternator is gone kaput and it's gonna cost you over $1,000 to fix. I didn't have that much in cash at the time. Called my dad. He said, I'm a grown man, I'm not gonna loan you the money. I went to the bank. I had a lack of credit at the time, so I did some research and found out that you can get that much cash the next day. Got the loan. I think it took 24 hours, if that, the next business day. Ordered my alternator, got it in my car, and I went on to Austin.
Online lending has become a multi-billion-dollar industry. Of the hundreds of online lenders, just a few dozen are tribally owned. These tribes are innovative, offering new products and services that are designed to protect borrowers and build customer loyalty, stepping in where traditional banks have failed.
I did contact the banks. I contacted my bank to see if there was anything that I could do, but because my credit was, completely ruined, there was no other source that I could get it from.
I have one credit card through college at a $300 limit, so didn't really use it too much. And apparently I learned that lack of credit is just as bad as bad credit.
You go to a bank and you get a small dollar loan of $500,000, $1,500 loans. They don't even take a look at those applications, and you're out the door, and next thing you know, you're still at square one.
And so that's what you're seeing with these products is people being able to do a search, and at your fingertips you can bring up all these different options that can help you. And why would you want to go to a bank and get the door slammed in your face when you can go in your own home on your own computer and find a solution?
And a lot of times when you go to the bank, they want you to take out a $15,000 loan or take a second mortgage out of your house. Well, that's not what we wanted. We wanted to get over that little hurdle that we had at that time and pay it off in a short amount of time. The bank doesn't have high interest rates, but also you're not going to get a $1,000 loan from a bank.
Every regulator I've spoken to has acknowledged that there is a dramatic need for these types of short-term lending products out in society, that they serve a valuable purpose, that there's a lot of underbanked folks out there who they don't have a credit card and they can't access a typical bank, so they have to look for alternatives, and this is one of them.
Online installment loans are a major innovation in consumer finance, a customer-driven evolution away from the 2-week payday loan typically offered at brick-and-mortar storefronts across America.
The difference between going to a storefront and getting an online loan is when you go to the storefront, you have to pay back the money every 2 weeks, all of it.
The payday loans, you have to pay it off right away. They just grab your check. The installment loans, they're willing to work with you.
So basically, whereas the payday loan, I think it's within 2 weeks, your next payday. With the installment loan, you have the option to spread it out. Maybe you don't have the full amount with your next pay. Maybe you pay half and you pay the other half next time. So you just have a little bit more choices with the installment loan.
Well, if I could be frank, payday loan, they don't care what's going on in your life. They want the full payment right off the bat in your next paycheck. No end, ifs or buts, you're paying us. Or you can pay, your interest, which is going to be 300 to 900%, and people get stuck paying their interest and never pay the principal. So these people are making money, twice as much, 4 times as much as your actual loan's even worth just on interest payments.
We don't ever want to give a loan out to someone who we don't think can pay the loan back. We want good customers, we want good clients, We don't want a bad loan. We don't want you to be in a bad situation. We want you to be able to pay that loan back and move on about your business and go on. And if you need us again, we'll be here to help.
The installment loan, you have it, you're paying your principal, you're paying your interest. It's all broken down to easy month-by-month payments, plain and simple, or paycheck-to-paycheck payments, or every biweekly whenever you get paid. I feel like I'm going to a bank getting a loan, even if it's really not my bank. That's how I feel as a customer, and that's how it's set up. So if you do your research, that's the best thing to do.
And so these are loans that are not tied to a paycheck. They are short-term, 6 months minimum terms over a period of time. And we're finding that, again, from a consumer standpoint, those are preferred because they know exactly when their payments are due and how much they're going to pay over time.
Some misinformed critics continue to portray all online lending as the predatory and usurious payday loan, painting the entire online lending landscape with the same broad brush.
We're not preying on anybody. This is a choice from the consumer. They're the ones that are clicking onto the website. To me, it's free enterprise. It's the freedom of their choice to choose this product.
You knew what you were paying. You knew how much the loan was that you were taking out. You knew what the interest rate was. You knew when your payments were scheduled to come out of your bank account. You knew what the backlash may have been if you didn't have the funds in your bank account. And you knew when the loan terms were going to end as well.
You make a judgment that that's the best bargain you can get. That all your other alternatives are more expensive.
Yes, if the need arises, I absolutely would use it again. Would it be my first option? Absolutely not. But I would use the service again, and I'm glad that it's there in case I need to.
It's not a complicated decision, and I trust most people will make that decision correctly. They will do the thing that's in their best interest.
Critics argue that the interest rates for these short-term loans, including payday and installment loans, are too high. Let's look at the math.
Let's say you have a 2-week loan, and let's say the price is $15. I'll give you $100. You can keep it for 2 weeks, and at the end of the 2 weeks, you give me back $115, okay? If you calculate the annual percentage rate on that, it comes to 390% or something like that. That's shockingly high. It's not relevant because you didn't borrow it for a year. You borrowed it for 2 weeks, and you knew what you were paying. You decided it was worth $15 to you to have that $100 for 2 weeks. Why is it worth it?
The check fees are expensive, at $35, $45, I think in some cases.
It's $35 every time you bounce a check.
I didn't have much time. I had a lack of credits, so it was pretty much my only option.
My car broke down, bills were due. One thing led to another, and I had no other way of getting money.
Having 3 weeks of no income, and a family and a mortgage and bills, it was a tough time and a scary time.
Back to the APR. $15 on $100 for 2 weeks is a 390% APR. And the critics say, do it at 36% APR. Okay, well, let's do the math on that. To have an APR of 36% on a $100 loan for 2 weeks means I could charge you $1.38. Do you know anybody that's going to make $100 loans for 2 weeks to people who have no credit history or a bad credit history for $1.38? I don't. So the people who are saying you should have a 36% APR, all they're trying to do is kill the business.
Next item on the agenda is to approve the board minutes from our last meeting.
In 2012, a small group of tribal leaders formed a trade group, NAFSA, the Native American Financial Services Association, to advocate for tribal sovereignty, promote responsible financial services, and develop relationships with federal and state governments in order to provide better economic opportunities in Indian country for the benefit of tribal communities.
As the senator said, the momentum is clearly there right now. We clearly have an avenue.
Perhaps more importantly, NAFSA presents a unified voice in the fight to shift public perception. and to confront discrimination against tribally owned lending businesses that too often find themselves under attack.
The whole resistance to it reminds me of when gaming first started. It was this whole idea that Native people, that Indian people could not do business in a good way. You know, that they could not function, that people would get ripped off, that, you know, it was like all of these phony, fake arguments, as far as I'm concerned, that was really created to prohibit, you know, the growth of tribes.
There is a real feeling out there that somehow Indian people need to be parented. And when I say parented, I mean that we're not capable of making our own business decisions. We're not capable or educated enough to not be taken advantage of. Well, I feel very strongly that people like myself, my tribal council, other tribal councils I work with, are very educated. We look very hard into what we're going to do. We assess the environment, and we do what we feel is right for our community and for our people.
I don't feel that there is any reason to believe that tribal governments are going to be any better or any worse at regulating business than a lot of governmental entities that I'm familiar with, you know, states or counties or the federal government or whatever. And so it just seems to me to be very parochial to say, well, you know, that we, either as state government or as federal government, are the only ones that have the kind of expertise that's necessary to regulate business in an appropriate way.
Getting into this this business was not taken lightly. We fully vetted the opportunity and looked at some of the bad actors in this space and wanted not to do that.
I'm never surprised in what we encounter when we try to when we find ways to provide for our people, because it seems like whenever we come up with something, it's always under attack. Just like when we went into gaming 25 years ago. I don't know if it's because they don't come up with the ideas and that Indian people aren't supposed to be that smart to come up with these ideas to provide for their people. That's kind of how I look at it.
It's going to be a fight. You know, it's always a fight when Indian country starts to do something different that, you know, goes against the norm. It's always a battle. We always have to prove ourselves. I mean, it goes right back to the federal recognition. You have to fight for federal recognition to be recognized. We had to fight for gaming. Well, this is the next fight. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a battle. And through an organization like NAFSA, we have now created this umbrella to fight this good fight. And it is going to be one.
In 2013, the Obama administration launched Operation Choke Point, a concerted effort designed to control and even shut down businesses like online lending that they simply didn't like, despite the fact that these businesses were not breaking any laws. Banks were pressured to cut off business accounts, payment processing abilities, and services to verify customer information, forcing some tribal operations out of business.
How's the federal government get rid of an industry it simply doesn't like? Easy. It cuts that industry off from the financial services it needs to operate. Sound impossible? Sure it does. However, that's exactly what the Department of Justice is doing in conjunction with the FDIC. This program even has a name, Operation Choke Point. It's designed to force legally operating and licensed entities out of business by choking them off from financial services they need.
Operation Choke Point is still a factor that cripples our business. In fact, you know, we are looking for another bank once again. You know, if the pressure they're getting is so great, you know, it could possibly put us out of business.
It hurt a lot of tribes. You know, there's several friends of ours in the tribal community that they didn't make it. You know, their operations, you know, it got choked out.
It decreased our revenue significantly. So services are once again being taken away, which is sad for me because, like I said, growing up with having nothing and growing up on the reservation, you don't ever want to see your people go back to that situation. So it is very disheartening to have to take things away from them. So as a tribal leader, that's difficult to see.
If the TLEs ever went away, we'd be back to square one and starting over. I mean, we've created, the ability for our members to dream again, and the thought of losing that is kind of scary. So.
It was a very scary time. It continues to be a very scary time, and it really opened our eyes to what we need to be paying attention to and what Indian country needs to be paying attention to. They could literally freeze our money and literally choke our governments out of existence within a short period of time by the actions of a few federal agencies working together in cooperation with one another.
This isn't a Republican or Democrat issue. This isn't a conservative liberal issue. This is an issue of DOJ stepping outside the law. It's just plain wrong, Mr. Chairman. However, I want to be very clear. I strongly support DOJ's authority to go after the bad actors. Those actions should be commended and should not be inhibited. But what cannot be tolerated is the federal government using its authority to broadly target entire industries, including those that obey the law and are living within the rules.
We got people right now, whether it's Indian tribes or other lenders, that are willing to serve this market. And why would we be telling them they can't? Now, if you want to tell them that there are certain rules they got to follow, that's fine. But you don't push people out of markets. Competition will improve the quality of service. And when you have 71 million people, a quarter of our population, unbanked or terribly underbanked, my goodness, let's look for ways to serve them.
The quick growth of the online lending industry has outpaced a general understanding of how Native American sovereignty interacts with federal and state laws, creating a tangled web of legal issues where state, tribal, and federal laws and policies are colliding.
The tribe's sovereign status within the United States is one that we had before other cultures came here, and the tribes have earned it by protecting it. And many of the battles and the wars that have gone on in the past that people don't remember, don't talk about too much. Pretty gruesome history in the U.S. with Europeans and Native people.
Without getting deep into the background and history, the sovereignty of Indian tribes have this additional overlay of a very unique relationship with the United States. And that's borne out through treaties. It's borne out through a whole section of USC 25, United States Code 25, is entitled Indians. Again, showing that Indian people and Indian tribes are separate and distinct in the United States than other groups.
There's always going to be a rub, I think, between states, tribes, and the federal government as far as who regulates, how they regulate, and who has the ultimate say-so. We feel strongly that we're self-regulated in this area, that we work with federal regulators according to the Dodd-Frank Act and various other federal laws, and that we don't necessarily have to work with state governments, but in ways in which it makes sense to provide protection to our consumers and to provide a better service, we're willing to in some aspects.
Last year, I heard a case in the Supreme Court called State of Michigan versus Bay Mills, which was about the question, can states regulate the tribes? I mean, after all, tribes live in and are present in various states. So what is the relationship between state government and these sovereign tribes? The U.S. Supreme Court, by a 5-4 decision, said that states can generally not regulate tribes, that is something really within the purview of the federal government, but that states don't have that as part of their set of powers.
The states are constantly wanting jurisdiction over the tribes when they see an economic benefit. When the tribes are poor and desolate, they don't want to have anything to do with them. But now that tribes are booming economically, they want a piece of that pie, and they want control over it.
Well, I think the Bay Mills decision makes clear that it makes clear two things. Number one, that states can't be in the business of regulating tribes. That's something for the federal government. And number two, this U.S. Supreme Court is going to take tribal interests very seriously. It's a game changer of a decision, and federal agencies or others that want to try and step on tribes do so at their peril.
Right now, it's just important that, you know, the status that the tribes have as sovereign nations is protected. And so the federal government as our trustee is an important player in that sense.
The only people that really have a right to take anything away from the tribes when it comes to sovereignties and treaty rights, it would be an act of Congress. And we find ourselves asking the Congress to help us to preserve those rights and our sovereignty to make sure that they're not jeopardized.
Despite all the roadblocks and challenges, the unlikely solution is found in cooperation. Tribes are taking active measures to establish and maintain positive relationships with state and federal agencies and regulators.
If our tribal members aren't doing well economically, then the state's not going to do well economically. I mean, we are all tied together here. Even though, you know, we have our own sovereign governments, we all live in New Mexico, and if I, as a New Mexico official, am not concerned about the economic well-being of tribal members on tribal land in New Mexico, then I'm not taking care of business.
You know, consumer confidence is everything. And when you have states coming in, you know, they're worried about their constituents, their people within their state. And I think that what NAFTA's goal is the protection of the consumer through these best practice models, the accreditation program, so that there is a set of criteria that NAFTA tribes will have to follow in order to move forward in an effective way, you know, with these products.
My approach has been to work with tribal governments to make sure that they have their own regulatory authorities that can deal in an effective way with this, because I think that it's better for tribal entities, it's better for us, it's certainly better on a federal level if we all recognize that tribal sovereignty and tribal authority and try and work with the tribes in a cooperative way instead of battling over who has the authority or who can tell who, you know, how to operate.
From where we started with the Bureau over 2 years ago to where we were yesterday, it just, you know, it's a testament to what all of the efforts of the tribal leaders and what they've done through NAFTA and all of the meetings, you know, with the feds, with the states, with an Indian country as well.
The difference between the bad actors and good actors in this industry is you don't see the bad actors approaching the CFPB, the FDIC, Department of Interior, Treasury, other federal agencies wanting to disclose not only their operations but their regulations, wanting input from the federal government as to how to responsibly regulate in the industry. They are hiding from regulation and they don't want to be transparent.
You know, I think it's also important that, you know, we continue to work with CFPB rather than working against them. I think we'll get better results.
While Native American tribes' primary entry into this relatively new world of e-commerce has been through its online lending businesses, tribal leaders recognize that the real issue is their sovereign right to participate in a global economy that is increasingly dependent on the internet.
E-commerce is huge. One of the things that I don't think that a lot of Indian country realizes that the attacks on short-term lending are actually attacks on e-commerce. The things that are being done now, it's going to affect the future. And tribes need to realize that we're working to preserve our rights as a tribal governments to operate on the internet.
The implications are much larger than just these online businesses. It's about tribal sovereignty in the e-commerce area, and that has implications for all of Indian country and the growth of tribal economic development.
And I think that's the message that other tribal leaders need to hear and need to understand. This is going to happen. You know, now you can be on the front of the train or you can be on the back of the train, but it's going to happen. And this train is leaving the station. And you would be advised to get on board and understand what this whole new world of e-commerce is about, because it is the next wave of economic development for your tribe.
It's a complicated story, and what's at stake is the future of economic development in Indian country.
The United States shares a sacred bond with our native nations. We have a sacred responsibility to all our young people, including Native youth. Every day that I have the honor to serve as your president, I will do everything I can to meet that responsibility and honor that trust and to do right by your nations and your children and future generations.
I have a master's degree in anthropology, so I studied the Native American culture quite a bit. And so when I saw that it was Native American, I said, good for them. They're getting something back.
Being able to help people be approved for these loans is surreal. It's an awesome feeling to be able to help people when they need it the most.